Every time one of the floorboards creaked underfoot, and she prayed the intruder in her kitchen wouldn't hear her approaching. She gripped the Glock in hand once she reached the landing. Her heartbeat raced as she leaned against the kitchen doorframe. She took a few deep breaths, psyching herself up, grateful that she'd always been a light sleeper. Would she have the nerve to shoot the bastard if it came to that? Yes, she realized, she would. Hopefully the mere sight of her would scare the person away. Besides, her house had nothing of value. Still gripping the gun with two hands, she held it up by her chin so that the barrel pointed towards the ceiling. Her hands trembled at the prospect of shooting another human being. From the sounds of it, the intruder seemed perfectly fine, rummaging around in her kitchen. But what were they looking for? She counted down from 3, took a couple of deep breaths, and then jumped out, pointing the weapon. What she saw surprised her. Carl. Although the night shift meant easy money, Carl Bjornson never liked the crazy hours, or the way it wreaked havoc on his body. It threw off his schedule for days to come. But since he had a daughter in college, he couldn't afford to turn down any overtime shifts offered to him. Not like he had much of a choice. The Shepherd's Bay Police Department employed only 5 full-time officers, one of them being the chief, and Harry rarely worked overnight unless absolutely necessary. Steve Needham had called in sick earlier with the flu, and none of the other officers could fill in on such short notice. He was pouring his 3rd cup of station coffee when the call came in from Isla Eaves. It had never made any sense for the station to keep a drip coffee maker when they could have owned one of those fancy new machines where all you did was insert the plastic cup of your choice, press power, and voila. He donned his cap and headed out with his coffee in hand. Normally, he would have welcomed a call at 3:33 a.m. But not this one. Not from Isla Eaves. And especially not when he'd been working to find that missing rich kid, Dakota James, by marking up all the areas on the town map that had not yet been searched. It puzzled him how a kid could practically disappear into thin air, especially a kid from such a wealthy part of town. A warm breeze stirred as he headed out to his car. It was late June, and summer was in full swing. The older he got, the more he hated summers in Shepherd's Bay. Not the weather, per se, but how this Maine town had transformed into something completely different from what it used to be. There had always been the swell of the summer crowd, moneyed and boozy, but now that more rich folks had moved in, it seemed the asshole ratio had increased significantly. Many of them had come from New York and Massachusetts, had moved away from their overcrowded and overpriced state. They'd come here to enjoy small-town life and all the natural beauty the place had to offer. That demographic shift had created an entirely different set of problems, pitting the rich outsiders against the working locals. But they had brought good things, too. Better restaurants and high-end coffee shops, a microbrewery, and a fantastic gelateria, a state-of-the-art boatyard that employed 12 locals. The effect was to put more money in the town's coffers and create much-needed jobs. All in all, he thought their presence in town had been a positive development. He drove through the dark streets with urgency, and yet, at the same time, feeling highly ambivalent about seeing the woman he'd fallen hard for back in high school. Although he'd gotten married and divorced since that time and had a kid, he'd always carried a torch for Isla. Too bad she had married that loser, Swisher Eaves. The early morning blackness flew past him. He sipped his bitter brew as he guided the cruiser down the 2-lane road. The surrounding trees rustled in the wind, convincing him that this call would be a false alarm. Regardless, he had an obligation to check on the matter, despite the fact that crime in this part of town was practically non-existent. He turned onto the road leading to the Eaves' home. Tall pine trees lined either side of the driveway. His thoughts wandered as he reflected on all the time and energy he'd put into searching for Dakota James.